Michigan football surprised everyone this past season. No one expected a team that was projected to only win 7 or 8 games to win the Big Ten, get a college football playoff berth, and go 12-2. No one saw it coming, except for the guy who bet, I think, what was it, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on Michigan to, I think, reach the college football playoff. I forget if it was reach or win, but anyway, that's just a little off-topic discussion. But the main reason Michigan was able to do these things, win the Big Ten, get 12 wins, beat Ohio State, reach the college football playoff, beat teams on the road in tough environments. Why could they do that? The offensive line. Offensive linemen are so overlooked. It's a disaster. Casual fans don't even know offensive linemen exist. They don't. They seriously don't. I mean, I myself have a hard time to a certain degree remembering, offensive linemen's names because they're rarely referenced. And honestly, a lot of people, including myself, sometimes overlook them. But at least I know some offensive linemen at my own school, like Zak Zinter, Trevor Keegan, Victor Aluwatimi, who's transferring in from Virginia. Like, I know these guys. I knew who Tyler Linderbaum was at Iowa. People don't know even those people. Offensive linemen are so overlooked. It's criminal. But they're the most important piece of the puzzle on the offensive side of the ball. Seriously. Teams that do not have good offensive lines, or teams that have offensive lines that are good, that have talent, but they perform badly in big games, it costs them. Ohio State, many Ohio State fans on this channel, many of them are active. You know this. Michigan, this past season, 42-27. CJ Stroud was sacked 4 times. He threw for nearly 400 yards. But what the stats don't tell you, unless you look deeply within the stats, is that he was pressured out of his mind. He made just enough mistakes, was sacked just enough times, was pressured just enough times to where he had to work to complete every pass. He had to. And in the end, because of inferior protection, Ohio State's O-line this year against Michigan did not play their best game. Lots of false starts. The offensive line had some problems throughout the whole year. And yeah, Michigan had generational pass rushers. But nonetheless, you know what I'm talking about. Good O-lines, great elite, more specifically O-lines, will get your team far. It's why Wisconsin and Iowa can do what they do. In the West, more often than not, is their good, disciplined offensive linemen. Michigan returns 3 out of their 4 offensive linemen. They return most of their 2-deep production, and we'll talk about this more in depth in a few minutes, bringing up depth charts and offensive line statistics that I have provided for me that I'm going to be reading off to you guys. But Michigan returns 3 out of their 4, 3 out of 5, pardon me. This is offensive line, not defensive line. 3 out of 5 offensive linemen. They add in a transfer who I think was an All-American on Virginia at center to replace, Andrew Vastardis, who's going off to the NFL. And Andrew Stueber, it looks like Trente Jones, Jeffrey Percy, Carson Barnhart, or someone in the 2-deep who has... Actually, a lot of 2-deep guys did have playing time at Michigan because of some injuries. Michigan's offensive line is veteran. They're veteran, they're well coached, and that's really all there is to it. I mean, Michigan doesn't lose their offensive line coach, like how they lost their D-line coach, lost their defensive coordinator, lost their offensive coordinator, who was also the wide receivers coach, in Josh Gaddis. Michigan still retains their O-line coach. Sharon Moore has high energy, one of the best recruiters at Michigan. And what's even more amazing to me is that with the firing of Ed Warner, this group improved. And Ed Warner really helped Michigan's offensive line after it struggled in the 2017 season. He improved our offensive line, and then when he left, our offensive line somehow improved even more. I thought this offensive line in 2021 would have been one of the inferior parts on the field, and it actually turned into one of the most superior parts on the field, if not the most superior part on the field outside of the defensive end position. After all, Michigan did win the best offensive line award in the nation. They won it straight up. And the Georgia game, there was a struggle there, but that's one of the only teams, actually the only team, who was able to manhandle and stop this O-line. The only one. Michigan State's good front seven couldn't do it. Penn State's good front seven, that was probably the second team that could actually test Michigan's O-line, strip sacking McNamara once, sacking him another time. Ohio State's front seven couldn't do it. Nebraska's front seven, even, I don't think they could do it much. So this offensive line is veteran. I think it's going to be one of the best in the Big Ten. Actually, I think it's going to be the best in the Big Ten, one of the best, if not the best, in the nation. Because in a few weeks, months here, I'm going to list my all Big Ten team. It's littered, literally, with Michigan offensive linemen basically make up the entire first team O-line. It's an amazing group of guys, and few teams can stop them. Again, the offensive line returns 3 out of 5 starters from 2021. Several two-deep players also return, and Michigan is bringing in center Victor Oluwatimi from Virginia. He was originally a 2-star, according to 24/7 Sports. He is now listed as a 4-star. 24/7 Sports has their own transfer portal rankings, which I find that pretty cool and informative, and you should check it out. Currently, Michigan has they're like, I think, 70-something in the transfer portal. Not a big fan of the lack of transfers coming in. Some of that's because of Michigan's academic standards. Some of that's because, the coaching staff probably isn't trying a whole lot, and a lot of the guys that we were targeting went to other schools. But this is a big pickup because whether we like to admit it or not, losing your center is huge. The center, the guy who, the guy who snaps the ball, don't know why it took me that long to say that, he's the leader of the offensive line for the most part. Andrew Vastardis leaving hurts. So does Andrew Stueber. But, both of those guys leaving hurts. It's good that we have experience. We as in Michigan. It's good that Michigan has experience coming in from another school, a Power 5 school specifically, to come in and help fill a hole. Even though, again, there's a lot of guys. The 2 deep is really good. There are a lot of guys that could come in and plug holes if injuries occur and do just as well, or nearly just as well. Michigan's O-line, it's amazing to me. It's fascinating. This group here, they're not all 5 stars, they're not all 4 stars, but again, they're well coached, and they helped Michigan last year. Let's actually check out some of the offensive line stats. They helped Michigan rush for 3,001 yards over 14 games for an average of 5.2 yards per carry and 39 rushing touchdowns. Michigan's O-line, they only allowed 14 sacks. And I think, just remembering off the top of my head, I think around a fourth or a fifth of those were to Georgia. We all know that Georgia's front seven might have had generational talent, might be one of the best front sevens in the history of football. We also know that Michigan did not play their best game against Georgia, which still makes me mad to this day, but it is what it is. I can't change anything. J.J. McCarthy was sacked 3 times. McNamara was sacked 11 times. This O-line, again, it was just really good at the ground game and protecting McNamara at the passing game. Michigan's O-line, according to FootballOutsiders.com, was also really good, placing in the top 25 in numerous categories. When it came to sack rate, Michigan was 6th in the country. When it came to normal downs sack rate, Michigan was 35th in the country. And when it came to pass down sack rate, when Michigan had to be clutch and had to pass the football, the offensive line did its job. And Michigan, normally it was either an incomplete pass or a completed pass. Rarely did you see McNamara get thrown to the ground by opposing D-lines when it was a third down or a down that Michigan really needed to pass the ball or just passed. So the outside of the Georgia game, again, that pass offense was rarely any pressure applied to McNamara. You saw it again in the Michigan State game. You saw it in the Ohio State game. The Penn State and Georgia, and credit Ebiketie, credit Nakobe Dean, credit Nolan Smith, like guys who are amazing defensive ends and linebackers specifically from Penn State and Georgia. Credit those guys for blowing up this amazing O-line, because State and Ohio State, they have talent too. MSU and OSU do, and they could not sack Michigan's quarterbacks. They could rarely tackle Michigan's running backs for loss. Just what an amazing group of guys. I again think they're going to be the best in the Big Ten. And I just wanted to make this video because it's interesting. And it's not just interesting, but it's going to be a huge part of Michigan's success. A lot of people think that Michigan's just going to slide back into the normal 10-3, 9-4, maybe 11-2 kind of team if they can somehow win their bowl game. A lot of people think that this past year was a fluke, and I understand that. And I think that it's still very much in the realm of possibility. Jim Harbaugh, it took him until year 7 to win the Big Ten. I don't know if he'll win it again. As a Michigan fan, I don't know if he'll win it. And as someone who just tries to analyze the sport and interpret it, I don't know if he will either. But the returning O-line production, Sharon Moore staying as O-line coach, and, that's the same coach, better, like, new recruits being added as well. A lot of guys returning, as I've mentioned thousands of times. The offensive line is the backbone, is the cell wall, if you were to treat Michigan's offense like a plant cell. It is the thing that protects all the integral pieces. It protects the running backs and quarterbacks. And if the quarterbacks are protected, they can throw to the wide receivers and tight ends. Speaking of which, the tight ends who can be used for blocking are also, both of them, Luke Schoonmaker and Eric All, are returning as well. So Michigan's offensive line, their ability to block up front is really strong. And I think that this group is going to propel Michigan into success once again, into that 11-win regular season that I think they have, where there will be a showdown with Ohio State for the East. It'll be interesting to see how this group fares against Michigan State, who has very strong defensive tackles, how they fare against Nebraska, who I think is a very strong linebacker core, how they face against Iowa, because Iowa always has solid defenses, and how they face against Ohio State too, who has new and better leadership at the defensive side of the ball. That's all I have to say for this video. There's not really 25 minutes of content to talk about offensive linemen, but just because you can't talk about them, because there's not as many stats to mention, or they're not as shiny, doesn't mean they're not important. Because this video here, I think, is one of the more important ones I have made and will make about Michigan football. It's important to realize that this group of offensive linemen should not be overlooked. They could very well be once again the best offensive line in the nation. And I think for the Big Ten, looking at it from a very early perspective, the Big Ten in general last year outside of Michigan struggled when it came to having offensive lines. Michigan State and Ohio State, 11-2 teams, had poor offensive lines compared to all other skill positions or regular positions they had on the field. Michigan State had one of the worst O-lines in the Big Ten. Ohio State's was poor by Ohio State standard. Iowa and Wisconsin had worse O-lines than usual. To me, it was Minnesota and Michigan that really had the better O-lines in the Big Ten. and had better O-lines than everyone thought they would. But offensive line play in the Big Ten, it's what the Big Ten's known for, but last year I thought that the Big Ten as a whole struggled with it, so Michigan has a huge advantage when it comes to the O-line. But that's, again, all I have to say. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. How many wins do you think Michigan is going to have this year? Tell me down below. And to have a question that involves the offensive line, do you think Michigan will be more of a run-centered or pass-centered team, and why? Tell me down below your answers to those two questions. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.